Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the Leader of the Opposition has given you a fair idea of the scope of the Commission's, what will be the Commission's activities, but just let me try to summarize it for you, to give it to you in broad outline. The problem with land and land ownership in Jamaica is so large that it is about time that we look again at ways in which we can organize the ownership and the registration of the ownership of land interests in Jamaica. So our terms of reference require us to look at, first of all, to look at what is already there. Look at the existing land tenure systems, the systems for recording the interests of persons in land in Jamaica. And I can tell you straight off, the existing systems are cumbersome, very often costly. They are not accessible to a number of people simply because not everybody is able to find the resources to be able to transfer what is their real interest into a piece of paper. And the highest and best indication of your interest in land in Jamaica is a registered interest, and you are given what is known as a certificate of title, a duplicate certificate of title. But that's a theory. It simply is unattainable or impractical to a number of people. And so what we have in practice is persons dying, for example, leaving land to 8 children, and the cost of subdividing the land, giving each of those persons an interest in the land is simply outside the reach very often of family members. They die, and the land simply is either squatted on by others, or family members from generation to generation occupy the land without having anything to show for it. They can't go to the bank and show the bank manager a title so that they can go and buy the fertilizer or the seeds, whatever, to develop the land. It's a very serious practical problem that we have had for a very long time. So we have to find a way, or terms of reference require us to find a way, in a nutshell, to deal with this practical problem. Look at the existing legislation and find a way to make it the systems more accessible, more practical, more meaningful to people. And there are a number of, we expect that we're going to have consultation, as the Leader of the Opposition indicated, with a number of bodies that have an interest in this area. There is the National Land Agency, there is the Titles Office, Jamaica Agricultural Society, there's one committee of the Jamaica Bar Association that has been looking at matters of this sort. There are communities, resettlement communities in bauxite areas where the problem is enormous as well too. We expect that we're going to have consultation with a number of these bodies and with these communities, in addition to doing the research to simply examine carefully the existing legislation before we can start putting on paper a meaningful set of recommendations. But I just think I want to say on behalf of the members of the Commission that we're really grateful to the Leader of the Opposition. Those of us who have been practicing in this land area and have an interest in this country have recognized this problem for a long time and are really grateful for the opportunity to do something about it. So I know I can speak for all the members of the Commission that we're looking forward to hopefully making some meaningful sets of recommendations that we can put forward into practical steps for implementation for approving the lot of people. in this country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions? Just identify yourself and the leader host that you represent. You are as clear as mud. And in your documents, you both have the composition of the membership of the Land Ownership Commission plus the terms of reference. So you can, in your package that was sent, and the presentation by the opposition leader. Yeah, and add Michael Vassiana. It's not on the sheet, but he's included. And he's an attorney at law who has been in practice for as long as normal.
Maybe a little less.
Little less. in commercial laws. No questions?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Sure.
Hi, good morning. Julian Pearson from Argia. I just wondering if you can clarify for me how hopeful is this commission going to be? I understand that there will be research into all the issues that you have outlined, but what exactly can the commission then do?
Well, what they will be doing ultimately is preparing recommendations which will form part of the policy proposals that the People's National Party will be using to guide our implementation of policy when we form the government. It will be an opportunity also, I think, to share our views, and they can assist us in reaching out and assisting the general population to understand the central significance of this problem, to creating the kind of society that I think every Jamaican wants, which is a more equitable society, because, you know, the cry everywhere is for justice when people demonstrating even. But what many don't understand is at the heart of the injustice, oftentimes, is this problem of the inability to use even the resources that are available to them, or the complete denial of access to the resources. But the short answer to your question is that they are assisting a future PNP administration in defining the measures to be taken. So when we form the government, it's not going to take a year and a half of study before we can do something, but we will be able to decide from day one what are the things we need to do. It may also be possible, depending on the degree of detail, that we can get to the point of even having people professionally qualified preparing preliminary drafts of legislation that can be ultimately taken to the Parliament. There is also the possibility of preparing private members' bills that could go to the Parliament from now, because if we don't necessarily want to wait just to do it when we are in office. In fact, we would like, as soon as it's practicable, to put in place measures that can be of benefit to the Jamaican people in this matter.
Hi, Mr. Campbell, TVJ News. I'd like to know, having had your experience being in government for many terms, what are you going to do to use your experience and your knowledge of different agencies and resources available to push through some of the red tapes that are there for persons to get loans from banks and other financial institutions, as well as the industry itself, because that process is very cumbersome. So what will you do to enhance that?
Well, thank you very much. The first point I would make is to remind of all the measures that were done which resulted in Jamaica during the last administration of the PNP to improve in the ease of doing business rankings. And in doing that, I would remind of the legislation that we introduced to make it easier to register personal assets. That is to say, things like the farmer's cows, his crop. Secured interest in personal property was the name of the legislation. But you still have the problem where many financial institutions prefer real property, meaning land, because they're just used to that. We have had experience. In fact, one of the issues that has caused us to move in this direction of getting this commission up is that even though we were the administration that started the land administration and management program, LAMP, which was intended to do much of this, which is to get land titles into the hands of people who don't have titles. The pace at which LAMP worked, with the best interest in mind, was so slow that we became very concerned that it would take another century before we were really able to make a serious dent on the problem, and that it needed more. So the second point I would make is that this initiative itself is born of our evaluation of some of the problems which we have encountered in trying to do to solve this problem, but which have proved impossible in solving. There are key areas, like at Accountant General's Department, the whole question of the titles office, where we have, and the lawyers in particular, have a lot of very direct experience about how to operate. As I said, in the Parliament, we will be such as in the budget debates, we were making representations then, and will continue, that many of the critical areas are in fact under financed. There's not enough resources in the budget. You see, without going back into this whole obviously controversial and annoying issue about taxation and the levels of taxation, the other side of this budget, which is bad, which we emphasized, is that it doesn't have an effective vision of economic growth. There are key areas that need funding, such as areas relating to land and land administration, which are not getting the adequate funding that is needed. Not to mention issues like education and all of that, which are vital for economic development. But there are simple measures that can be introduced that don't take a lot of money, but which can make life much easier in dealing with this, such as making provision for the surveying of land in the urban areas. You have communities that have been declared under the Local Development Communities Act. I can speak of those in my constituency and those in others, where all it really needs is a couple $1 million, not billions, that would enable easier identification of the parcels of land, easier transfers of land, which would unlock a tremendous new lease on life for many families. And so we are not going to wait on this commission to continue to make those representations, but we think that there are important areas of legislative reform which have not been dealt with and which need to be dealt with. There were tremendous gains made in this area in the 70s, I think, during that administration, but there has not been the same pace of legislative work done since, and we want to correct that.
And let me say,
yes, please.
Let me say as well that recognizing that some of the things that are be done will not be done until we're in government and while the commission does its work. The fact is that there are things that we will continue to champion. For example, the amendments to the Special Provisions Act that established LAMP. As the leader of opposition said, LAMP was established by the People's National Party administration, and there are challenges with its application, issues of generational land, issues of subdivision approval, and the requirement of the one spot. How do you deal with those issues? And we will continue to champion those, but notwithstanding that there is a recognition that there is a need for an harmonization of the various laws that impact on land. So for example, when you look at subdivision, there's a requirement that there are certain things that need to be in place for one to get a subdivision approval. The fact of the matter is that most persons simply cannot either afford the subdivision or they can't meet the requirements. And so the commission, therefore, will be, one of the tasks will be to look at these issues and make recommendations to see how we can deal with these things, particularly to help persons who need land ownership but simply can't afford, whether because it's a survey, the cost of the survey, or because of the requirements on the existing laws. Yes? And as the leader of opposition said, one of the things, of course, that we will continue to do has to do with how do we look at what exists and how we can make it better. Yes? In the Registration of Titles Act, for example, it speaks about the Assurance Fund. I mean, how is that something that we can use to help persons in obtaining title? And if it is so, then how do we use it so that people do not see it as a handout, but as a means to help them to get title, to be a part of the ownership society that our administration would want to create? And, you know, land ownership has always been something that is near and dear to the People's National Party. From the very beginning with our founding father, Norman Manley, we started it. You know, we had a discussion this morning where we spoke about the Facilities for Titles Act, which made it so much easier for the regular Joe to have a halfway title, so to speak. And what it means that if you're in possession for 7 years, then you could easily apply for a certificate of compliance for that for your property. And once you have that, it makes it one step easier to get a title under the Registration of Titles Act. And so these are some of the things that we are aware of, but we know that there are challenges, and the Commission will look at all of these provisions and see how we can harmonize them so that at the end of the day, all Jamaicans can own a piece of the land and feel that they have a right to this rock.
Land ownership, though, is not only an issue of cost or affordability. As I said, the NHD process in and of itself is very cumbersome. As attorneys, I'm sure you're not dealing with clients who have had a frustrating experience in the NHD, having to go back and forth to get additional documents that were not established in the list of things required. What is it that you're going to be doing? Are you going to be going through NHD in and of itself? How operates now to see what
One of the mandates.
Procedural matters.
Absolutely. And we will be speaking later on down in a couple of weeks, in a few weeks, to the housing dimension specifically as part of this problem of building the stakeholder, the ownership society that we're seeking. We have another group that has been doing some work and looking at how to treat, particularly with the housing trust, and getting adjustments to the way that it functions so that we can, among other things, simplify access. I don't want to speak too much to that now because, you know, well, we will be talking about it later. But also to emphasize that, going back to your first question, what was implicit in your first question, what our stint in office last time pointed us to, and we are trying to use this period to do a lot of reflection, is that oftentimes we were building housing schemes but not communities. And that there again needs to be adjustment to the way in which the trust operates. A community needs not just the house, but it needs schools, it needs police stations, it needs play areas, it needs medical facilities and the like, and all of this has to be factored into the expenditures, because the house owner wants his house as his first claim on the NHT, but they also want those other things to live the kind of life that they want their families to have. And so we are looking at that issue as well as other issues. Another issue that we are looking at is how can we revive some of the communities that now exist in our city centers, places like Vineyard Town, like Eastwood Park Gardens, Marvally, Almond Town, just to go widely, where it is obvious that they need kind of revival, where there are many sometimes abandoned or derelict properties, and that there ought to be a role for the trust in reviving these communities and getting people to have housing, better quality housing. So all of that, all of those issues are some of the things that we have this group working on. As I said, we're going to come with proposals in a few weeks' time.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much for coming. And as I said, in your package, there is the presentation from Dr. Phillips, the terms of reference, and the composition of the commission. Thank you.
Thank you.